Welcome, everybody, to the 2017 Writers' Trust Awards, and a welcome to you who are here and online. I am very grateful to be here. I am very glad to be here. You should be glad that I'm here, and by here, I mean on the stage as opposed to sitting among you, which is where I normally am for these events. I didn't have time to go to the dry cleaner this week, so I did one of the top 10 stupid things I've ever done in my life. I gave my suit a quick shot with Febreze, and now I smell like a carpet. Tuscan morning. So I have to begin by correcting something that Kevin Hardcastle said on Twitter earlier today. We will not actually be giving away something like $4 million tonight, but we will be awarding over $250,000 to writers of fiction, poetry, children's literature, and nonfiction. According to Jason Kenney in Alberta, $250,000 a year barely qualifies as middle class, but it sounds like a lot of money to me. And I can tell you for a fact that it would have sounded like a great deal of money to your predecessors. In 1959, its first full year in operation, the Canada Council for the Arts spent $44,000 on writers for the entire country. The premier literary prize in the country at that time was, of course, the Governor General's Literary Awards, which was then worth $1,000, which is about $8,000 today. Tonight, the prize for nonfiction alone is $60,000. And thanks to Rogers, the fiction prize has been doubled this year to $50,000. There are, of course, many other prizes in Canada now. Mark Medley provided a helpful list in the Globe and Mail 2 weeks ago in an article that wondered if maybe there are too many literary prizes in this country and too much money being given to writers. For the record, I love and respect Mark Medley. We all love and respect Mark Medley, and we wish him well now that he's leaving the book section of his paper for the far less contentious opinions page. But I do not think there are too many literary prizes in this country or too much money being awarded. First, as several people said in Mark's piece, the rise of prizes is partly a response to the decline of reviewers, and I would say especially to the near disappearance of regular reviewers. That is, people, whether in print or radio, whose voices and opinions we get to know and trust, even when we know we don't like their opinions. It is strange to me that we think it's okay and right to have regular reviewers for theater and for film, but not for books. And even apparently that it's okay to assign star ratings to movies and to theaters, but not to books. Second, we have more prizes, and their value has increased because some things have not changed since the 1960s, and one of those is that it is still tough to make a living from writing in this country. This is an evening of celebration, so I will not belabor the statistics. But I will say this. When Margaret Atwood and Al Purdy won their first literary awards, both of them had to borrow clothes to attend the ceremony. I would be willing to bet that that is true of more than one nominee this evening, or someone in this room who's been on this stage before. Third, and to me most important, we have more prizes now because we need more prizes to recognize the astonishing growth and diversity of Canadian literature since the 1960s. In 1959, it was still possible to think of such a thing as one prize for the country, that there could be such a thing as the Canadian book, or two Canadian books, one for English Canada and one for French Canada. That is not possible anymore. There is no such thing as Canadian literature anymore. CanLit is just a caricature on Twitter or a useful abstraction on an evening like this. Canadian literature is now just the sum of its many parts, and tonight we get to thank and to honor some of those parts, the finalists and the awards of a set of awards for writers, created by writers, and judged by writers. Over the course of the evening, we will be highlighting the individual, foundation, and corporate benefactors that made tonight's prizes possible. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a few additional sponsors and partners that help sponsor the Writers' Trust Awards. They are our government sponsor, the Department of Canadian Heritage. Our media sponsors, we're still waiting. There we are. Our media sponsors, CBC Books and the Globe and Mail. And our other partners, Chatelaine, Indigo, International Festival of Authors, Maclean's Magazines, Quill and Choir, Steam Whistle Brewing, and White Pine Pictures. A great big thank you to them for the role that they play in making things. Seriously, we could not do this without them. And thank you to all of you for attending tonight's celebration. So you can sit back now and relax, and we will start giving some of that $4 million away. This evening's first award, to present the evening's first award, she's the author and illustrator of nearly 40 books for babies, children, and teens. To present the Vicki Metcalf Award for Literature for Young People, a prize that she won in 2009, please welcome Martha Jocelyn. Thank you.
More than 50 years ago, a wonderful woman named Vicki Metcalf created a prize to stimulate the writing of literature for Canadian children. Back then, books for young readers came mostly from abroad and featured British and American kids. It was a rare treat for children of my generation to find our Canadian lives reflected in the stories that we read. Much has changed since then, and will continue to change in the coming years. Young readers now increasingly can recognize themselves and their communities in the stories being published. As more children are represented, so too are the opportunities to discover characters and worlds entirely unlike our own, unique, diverse voices that capture a range of experience previously ignored or silenced. Stories told with honesty and authority have the power to illuminate the shadowed corners of our country. I was delighted to serve on this year's jury with Deirdre Baker and Richard Van Camp to survey the ever more admirable field of writers for young readers. We're grateful to the Metcalf Foundation for continuing to sponsor this prize, and we heartily applaud their decision this year to raise the cash value to $25,000. How lucky am I to have a say in selecting the first writer to benefit from that? The writing of this year's winner is drenched in the world of the Northern Ontario communities in which she was raised. Over the course of 7 novels for middle grade and teen readers, she has explored the traditions of her people and the incursions of modernity. Her most recent publication is a haunting novel about a 12-year-old girl's sojourn in a residential school, an experience based on her own life. The winner of the 2017 Vicki Metcalf Award for Literature for Young People is Ruby Slipperjack. Here's the jury's citation. Ruby Slipperjack is a trailbreaker in the field of Indigenous literature and of children's literature in general, welcoming readers into the lives of young Anishinaabe protagonists whose vigorous, resilient voices carry us into family and community, into tiny northern towns and reserves, and over vast expanse of forest, rock, river, and lake. In subject matter and setting, she ranges where no other children's writer in Canada has gone. Slipperjack is exceptional in portraying the quandaries, joys, and struggles of her young protagonists with compassion and humor, and at the same time gently teaching traditional ways in the context of contemporary Indigenous life. She shows the elasticity and strength of relationships between generations, across families, and among those who offer friendship to the wanderer. She offers details that make us see vividly the close-up of wild blueberries hanging from their bushes or the worn linoleum in front of a stove. But she also makes us feel the enormity of the forest, the endless hundreds of lakes, and the wonderfully ordinary, assured habits and traditions of canoeing, camping, fishing, hunting, and harvesting. Ruby Slipperjack, you remind us all of the power of family, tradition, and heritage. Miigwech for all that you have done for so many for so long.
Can't see anything anymore. Miigwech, thank you so very much. Of all the novels that I've written, these are my words were the most difficult. It was difficult because I had to draw on my personal experiences in residential school, and sometimes these memories are very painful to recall. And believe me, I had nightmares. As you know, the federal policy connected to the establishment of residential schools was simply to take the Indian out of the child. It did profoundly damage those who were forced to undergo this unjust, morally reprehensible policy. But it failed. We're still here. I'm still here. In writing this book, I wanted young readers to know what it's like to lose everything that you know. I wanted them to feel that what it was like to lose the parents, your siblings, their extended family, friends, the community, and most importantly, their cultural identity. As an educator and as a teacher, it was my duty, my responsibility to provide young readers a balance in learning about the residential school experience. I did this with humor and the sentiment of hope. Over the past year, I sincerely appreciate the feedback I have received from librarians and teachers who informed me that children enjoyed both reading, these are my words, and being read to in the classroom. To that end, I may have achieved that balance. Perhaps someday all Canadians will know and understand the legacy of the residential school experience. From my perspective, to accomplish this, we must first educate our children. We are all fortunate to live in a country that celebrates its writers on an annual basis. It's a wonderful thing. I am deeply grateful to the Writers' Trust and the judges of the Vicki Metcalf Award for this. It would be remiss of me not to thank and acknowledge Scholastics Canada for their unflagging support and the hard work in the editing process of this book. Without Scholastics Canada, I would not be here tonight. This prize was such a surprise and is deeply appreciated. To the survivors of the residential schools, again, I thank you for this honor of this award. Miigwech.
Congratulations, Ruby. He is the chair of the Writers' Trust of Canada and also chair of the Governor-General's Performing Arts Award. To present the Writers' Trust Engel Finley Award, please welcome Douglas Knight.
Thank you, Nick. And by the way, you look just fine. That's the smell. You stay over there. Well, I am Douglas Knight, and I am the chair of the Writers' Trust, and thank you all for being here this evening. I have been saying for at least the last year or so, or at least I've been asking this question, has there ever been a time when Canadian voices were more welcome and more needed? Canada's unique place in the world seems to provide fertile soil for our most acute observers, the storytellers, our writers. You've heard this before, but we do. We punch way above our weight, as you can see in the range and depth and quality of our literary life tonight. Tonight in the Writers' Trust Awards, but also to echo Nick, in the Giller, in the Governor-General's Literary Awards, and in addition to the giant spotlight that all of these awards shine on our writers, the core mission of the Writers' Trust has been to add some nutrients to that fertile Canadian soil by putting money directly into the hands of writers. And as you've heard, we're going to be awarding $260,000 tonight. That's the most money awarded in a single night anywhere in Canada. And this award that I'm about to announce is the Writers' Trust Engel Finley Award. It's particularly enjoyable to present this one because, like the evening's first prize, congratulations, by the way, Ruby, it recognizes writers not for a single book, but for their career to date. It's not a Lifetime Achievement Award. In this case, the Engel Finley Award is for a writer of fiction in mid-career. There is no submission process. The winning writer has no idea they're being considered for the Engel Finley Award until the day they receive a phone call, out of the blue, from the Writers' Trust. Just imagine what it's like to pick up the phone one afternoon and be told that a jury of your peers has read everything you've ever published and determined that your exemplary talent should be cheered and nurtured and rewarded. And we're inviting you to Toronto to collect a check for $25,000 and to join into a celebration of great Canadian voices. Well, that's what it's like to get the Engel Finley Award. Now, this award is made possible by donations from the Pobledo Family Foundation, the Michael Griesdorf Foundation, and believe it or not, the Board of Directors of the Writers' Trust. So thank you all for your support. This year's winner was selected by a jury composed of Catherine Gouvier, Alexander MacLeod, and Evan Robinson. We would like to thank them for their passion and their very thoughtful work. The 2017 winner is the author of 4 novels, a collection of short stories, and a poetry collection. Now, for those of you who are young and aspiring writers, I want you to listen carefully to this. Her first job was filling the dairy coolers in a Max Milk. Then she went on to work as a file clerk, a receptionist, a cocktail waitress, a model, an actor, my favorite, a chocolate sampler, and the host of a booth at a plumber's convention. Luckily for readers, she found her true vocation as a writer. She's appeared in the Journey Prize anthology, she's won the Danuta Gleed Literary Award, and she was longlisted for the Giller. So please join me in congratulating the winner of the 2017 Engel Finley Award, Billy Livingston. The jury citation says, Billy Livingston is the real deal. Her prose stands up against this hard world, and her clear vision is forgiving, furious, and tender. She understands her character so well and writes about vulnerability, poverty, and the profound compromises of family love with deep compassion. The children especially, but all the criminals, con artists, thieves, and everyone hustling on the fringes have unforgettable stories. Livingston's writing is masterfully crafted, jammed with vivid details and strobed, someone wrote this really well, strobed with flashes of real comedy. It emits a pure light that cuts through the darkness and leaves us laughing mercifully in the face of our most difficult truths. Congratulations, Billy.
It's true. It's a pretty amazing phone call to get. And it's shocking how frightening it is to say thank you right now. And I think that's a lot to do with how surreal it is to be considered in the same category as the incredible writers who found themselves in the same spot where I'm standing right now. We all know so many wonderful writers who deserve to be here, and I can only imagine what the jury must have gone through in choosing just one tonight. So I am deeply grateful to Eden Robinson and Catherine Govier and Alexander MacLeod for the sweat and tears that had to have gone into a job like this. It occurred to me when I got the call that this award is quite aptly named, since the writing of both Marian Engel and Timothy Finley was known for its irony and sly humor. And I think a little of that goes a long way for life in general, but certainly for the life of a writer, especially when you so frequently have people asking you questions like Flannery O'Connor's mother used to ask her, "Why don't you just write a novel people want to read?" A lot of people. So the Engel Finley Award, it's a magnificent way of affirming that it's the writing that matters and not the numbers. It's incredible to be told when it feels like you're bumping along in the middle of nowhere that you're on the right path, and it feels like a big, beautiful lifeline. Sometimes when you meet people, and it's clear that they have gone through a lot of adversity, you wonder why some people not only survive but flourish, and others stumble and fall. And I think that the key to so much of our ability to thrive has to do with knowing that even one person believes in you. And I don't think that I would be here tonight if it weren't for the belief my family had in me, regardless of the wreckage we often found ourselves in. I can't imagine that I would be here if it weren't for my wonderful editor, Anne Collins, who had faith in me from those very first pages she read 18 years ago, for the faith that Random House in general had in me. It's inexpressible what it means. And I am brimming, absolutely overflowing with gratitude for my husband, Timothy, who showers me, envelops me with constant loving belief every day of our life together. As a novelist, one's job is to be a kind of existential witness, to record strength, human strength and frailty, to bear witness to the wars in other countries and the wars in our own living rooms. And I am so very thankful to the Writers' Trust of Canada and to the sponsors for believing in writers as those crucial witnesses and for believing in the power of literature. Thank you.
To present our next prize, he's an author and translator, and he was a very good friend of the late Matt Cohen, after whom this next prize is named. Please welcome Wayne Grady.
Thank you, Nick. For the record, this is my jacket, but I borrowed the tie. For the past 17 years, the Writers' Trust Matt Cohen Award in celebration of the writing life has been presented in memory of Matt Cohen, a brilliant writer and a strong supporter of Canadian literature. As the author of more than 30 books, a founding member of the Writers' Union of Canada, and an internationally celebrated writer, Matt helped put Canada on the world literary map. Upon his death in 1999, the Writers' Trust decided to present an annual award in Matt's name to a writer who has made a significant and lasting contribution to Canadian literature and who has lived the writing life. But before announcing this year's winner, I want to take a moment to thank two individuals without whom this award would not be possible. Marla and David Lieberg are an extraordinary couple, avid readers, engaged philanthropists. They have a deep affection for and dedication to the work of Canadian writers. Marla and David have supported this prize for 8 years now, and this year they have generously expanded that support, enlarging the prize purse to $25,000. We're extremely grateful. Thank you. I was pleased to serve on this year's winner selection committee, as I have for the 17 years that it has been in existence, along with Patsy Aldana, Matt Cohen's widow, Graham Gibson, and Don Oravec. This year, we are proud to announce that the 2017 Matt Cohen Award in celebration of the writing life goes to Diane Champerlain. Where is she? Oh. From the publication in 1984 of her first book, oh, wait a minute. Congratulations. It's not in my notes, I just forgot that part. From the publication in 1984 of her first book, Double Exposures, a story told through words and photographs, Diane has pushed the boundaries of form. In her early collections of short fiction, including The Man of My Dreams, Hockey Night in Canada, and Frogs and Other Stories, she experimented with the genre, defying convention, refusing to be shackled by tradition, but at the same time holding herself to the highest standard. She brought the same imagination and rigor to her debut novel, In the Language of Love, in which each of its 100 chapters is based on a word in the standard word association test used to measure sanity. Her novel, Our Lady of the Lost and Found, published in 2001, is narrated by the Virgin Mary. In her 2008 novel, At a Loss for Words, her character, a writer with writer's block, turns to the random words around her in horoscopes, fortune cookies, emails, and self-help manuals to express a love that cannot be realized in any other way. In Names of the Dead, an elegy for the victims of September 11, she lists the names and stories of everyone killed on that era-ending day to present a meditation on terror, grief, and the everydayness of tragedy and loss. And last year, she turned her unique, unsparing lens on herself in her first work of literary nonfiction, This Is Not My Life, a memoir of love, prison, and other complications in which she recounts the fallout from her relationship with an inmate of Kingston Penitentiary. This year, her early and uncollected short stories have been gathered and published in a single magnificent volume entitled First Things First. Although never at a loss for words herself, she at times incorporates illustrations in her stories, fusing words and images to create a language of her own in works such as Forms of Devotion and By the Book. She is now creating single works of word and image collage. Through her 33 years as a writer, Diane has definitely lived the writer's life. In the process, she has dissected not only genres, but words themselves, penetrating the arcane elements of language as a means of getting at what is fundamental to the human heart. Please join me in welcoming and congratulating Diane Champerlain.
Thank you so much, Wayne. That was wonderful. I've only got a few minutes here, so I'm going to start with the thank yous, because I think I'm probably going to get a little emotional later on. We'll save that. First, I want to thank the Writers' Trust, who have always been supportive of me for many, many years, and of all Canadian writers. I also want to thank Marla and David Lieberg, who I met last night for the first time, and we had a wonderful time. Thank you so much. And I want to thank the selection committee, of course. I've had a number of publishers over the years. Right now, I'm in the enviable position of actually having two. So I want to thank both of them. First, I want to thank everyone past and present at HarperCollins Canada, who's been my primary publisher since 1994. I especially want to thank Phyllis Bruce, Iris Tupholme, and my dear and lovely editor, Jennifer Lambert. My second publisher is Biblioasis in Windsor, so I want to thank Dan Wells and everyone there. They seem to be always up for a challenge, and they're the ones who have published my collage-type work, so I really appreciate that. And I want to thank all my readers over all these years who seem to have been willing to go with me along my meandering career path. This is the part now, I'm getting to the emotional part now. Okay. I'm especially honored to be given this award because Matt Cohen was a friend of mine. I have many fond memories of enjoying a summer afternoon with him on the patio of Chez Piggy in Kingston. Wayne was usually there too, in Maryland. But in addition to being a funny and inspiring friend, Matt also played a very important role in my writing career. It was Matt who introduced me and my work to his agent, the inimitable Bella Palmer, way back in 1989. Bella then became my brilliant agent for the next 25 years. She's only recently retired. She's now 91 years old. Our relationship became much more than just business, and she often called me her third daughter. So thanks, Matt, for bringing us together. Now, back in those early days as a young writer, with so many older writers to look up to, it was hard, actually impossible, to imagine that one day I would be a senior writer too, and yet here I am. When my first novel, In the Language of Love, came out in 1994 or 1996 in the US, Michael Ondaatje was persuaded by Bella to write a blurb in which he said, "Diane Champerlain is, for my money, the most exciting younger writer in Canada today." Of course, I was thrilled, but I said to him, "Michael, I won't always be younger." To which he laughed and said, "You'll always be younger than me." As Wayne mentioned, earlier this year, Biblioasis published a retrospective collection of 24 of my early stories called First Things First. This is my 14th book, and it includes my very first published story from way back in 1974. So yes, I have been doing this for a very long time. I am a senior writer. Putting together that book was a fascinating process. In fact, it was great to have a new book coming out that I didn't actually have to write. I think Matt would have appreciated that. The only new thing in it is the preface, in which I looked back over my own long career and offered some advice to younger writers myself. So I'm just going to share that tonight with all of you. In retrospect, I realize it was not confidence that made me think I could do whatever I wanted in a short story. It was that stubbornness of mine. Whereas confidence is a flighty, temperamental quality that will always wax and wane, stubbornness is a good, solid thing. Not always wise, but certainly reliable, steadfast, and dependable. Confidence is just as likely to up and leave you flat without warning, just when you need it the most. But stubbornness can be a splendid thing that will never let you down. So in terms of the writing life, I think stubbornness is a very good thing. And to all new writers, this is also from the preface, I made a list, of course I did, Anybody who's read my work knows how much I love lists. I made a list of what I would like to say to them, as well as to my younger self, to anybody who's thinking about a writing life and how to do it. Keep going. You'll get there. Read good books. Be stubborn. Be patient. Read more good books. And always remember that you have to do the first things first. Thank you.
Congratulations, Diane. Richly deserved. And now to present the Latner Writers Trust Poetry Prize, please welcome the Executive Director of the Latner Family Foundation, William Hewitt.
Judging poetry is a tricky business. What exactly is it that makes a reader's heart soar? This vital art form dramatizes and informs with metaphors and feelings, mysteries and politics. It illuminates our lives and helps us understand our own culture and the culture of other communities. 4 years ago, the Latner Family Foundation announced a 10-year sponsorship of this prize with the intention of advancing and celebrating the strongest voices in Canadian poetry. A 3-member jury is asked to survey the field of Canadian poetry and select a candidate who consistently displays excellence in their writing and the promise of additional compelling work to come. On behalf of the Latner Family Foundation, I'd like to express gratitude to the jurors, your jurors, Alex Burdick, Soraya Pirbay, and Gregory Schofield, for the wisdom and enthusiasm they brought to their task. Tonight's $25,000 prize will be awarded to a poet who has demonstrated mastery of this art form. Over a span of 25 years and 4 collections of poetry, she has exhibited consistent quality and artistic growth. She is a past finalist of the Governor General's Literary Award, recently won the Indigenous Peoples Writing Award, and is widely recognized for weaving Cree language and teachings into her work. The winner of the 2017 Latner Writers Trust Poetry Prize is Louise Bernice Half. In the works of Louise Bernice Half, we're in the presence of an extraordinary storyteller. Oji Chi Ta Isiwe Yu. Basically a warrior woman, translated. One whose voice emerges from profound solitude and simultaneously opens to a vast polyphony of voices. Half's poems are highly attuned to speech, silence, stillness, to breath, to incantation, to creating a taut relationship, a resonant relationship between the page and the reader. She leaves no experience unturned. Her own life, the violence experienced by Indigenous women, and the painful legacy of the residential school system. Half's poetics refuse the hierarchy of colonial literary critique, instead affirming the equality and contemporary of the ancestral. The mythology, or the mythological, holding a multiplicity of cosmologies, a quotidian of realities, as a relevant and urgent. That's a mouthful, but sincerely stated. In so doing, she will not allow any of us to read Indigenous narrative as analogy. She resists the lyric as a strategy for making experience, especially the process of truth and reconciliation, forgiving, and safe, requiring instead of vigorous accountability. Half reminds us not only of the consciousness that went into that we want to be heard, but listen back and listening to our listening. Her work cannot be assimilated in the canon of contemporary Canadian literature. Instead, it must be ingested, transforming our collective literature on a cellular level, reimagining our identities, languages, and memories as Denzians of Turtle Island. Congratulations. And the most important thing.
Oh, okay. Ganaskom now, ano ska tips ka gepentotowin. Wig matun. I puiteo magapa te anaski ene hiwe an mananigan. Samen toitaman ganstuta ge Canadians ni nano mutanigan e gitagutea. Ne watski sika makani mitoksini en sigasun. Ewa uta nehio gagi wichek ninaskuma ge pesitoskot. I give thanks to all the people of the First Nations who reside on this territory, and I always speak Cree as I travel across this country, since it is the first language of this country, as well as other Indigenous languages. So I give you thanks for that listening. I wasn't sure. Well, I spoke about burning in this midnight dream in this thank you speech, so if you can bear with me, I'll do my best. Burning in this midnight dream began its walk before I was born, and when it seared my soul, I tripped over my consciousness and lost daylight 4 times in the journey of writing it. I have come out of its depths after its sweeping winds blew me into the shoreline of life again. Burning now has its own journey, and I follow, helping it to sing its songs in hopes that those who read it, her words will suffer with enlightenment. Beauty and imperfection, I am told, go together. We can and must celebrate the scars. It is imperfection, after all, that joins our hearts. I lifted up the pen, memory and thought alone, but from the heavens creation penetrated my soul, calling this morning. In the same room, my husband's warm breath, the strength of his arms carried me. My adult children, Astino Miyasu, gave me the courage to forge on this wayward trail. My 3 grandsons, Josiah, Alistair, Miokisiko, who I hope will inherit the goodness of their Cree ancestors and honor their mixed blood roots, will carry on this dance of the Sweat Lodge, this recovered path. I am grateful to the Latner family. Their generous and kind gift for poetry will be forever engraved in the landscape of my heart. To my publisher, who is here tonight, my heartfelt thanks for printing it in the first place. To my mother-in-law, who bought dozens of books and passed them on to all her friends. My Butt family and many dear friends who are here this night, your lives are intertwined with mine, and I couldn't ask for a better journey. Last but not least, to the jury who worked with full hearts at all the readings of these poetic voices, I know the toil it can take as you slouch over coffee or tea, marking your hearts with all these words. Thank you to all the organizers who helped make this transition happen. Thank you with all my being. Ai hai, kanaskom now. Ai hai. Thank you.
To present the Writers' Trust McClellan and Stewart Journey Prize, please welcome the author of the story collection, The Best Place on Earth, Ayelet Sabari.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. I'm pleased to be here tonight to announce the winner of the 2017 Journey Prize. It was an honor to serve on this year's jury, and I'd like to thank my fellow jurors, Grace O'Connell and Kevin Hardcastle, for their careful reading and thoughtful comments as we deliberated. As writers, readers, and lovers of the short story, we were thrilled to be invited to serve on this jury, because it meant reading some of the finest short fiction published in Canadian literary magazines in the previous year. Short fiction is the gymnastics of writing. Technical, demanding, and when done well, it looks effortless. But writers know that writing an excellent story is the farthest thing from effortless. For 29 years, the Journey Prize celebrated the art and effort of short fiction, and in doing so has introduced readers to the next generation of great Canadian writers. It is made possible by James A. Michener's donation of his Canadian royalty earnings from his 1988 novel, Journey. This prize is one of the most significant monetary awards given to emerging writers in Canada. The finalists receive $1,000 and an immeasurable boost to their careers. A prize of $2,000 is given to the literary magazine that published the winning story, and the winner receives $10,000. McClelland and Stewart annually publishes the Journey Prize stories, an anthology that constitutes the long list for the prize. The stories included in this year's anthology are each spectacular in their own way. The distinct quality that defined these stories as a group was an undefined aliveness, that singular, elusive characteristic that told us we were in the presence of something special. The finalists for the 2017 Journey Prize are Sharon Bala for Butter Tea at Starbucks, published by the New Quarterly. And Darlene Napons for She is Water, published by the Malahat Review. And the winner of the $10,000 Journey Prize is Sharon Bala for Butter Tea at Starbucks, published by the New Quarterly. Sharon?
So I don't think I can be nearly as articulate as everyone else who's been up here. So I'm just going to say a few words of gratitude. First of all, thank you to the Writers' Trust for putting on this whole event and all of these awards, and for really supporting new voices when you're just writing at home for years or months or however long it takes to get a story out. In this case, this story, I started it in 2012 and I published it last year. You can really kind of lose hope. So thank you to the Writers' Trust for supporting us who are just getting started. And to McClelland and Stewart who put in all the hard work of administering this award. This is really special for me too because one of the main people who does all the hard work is Anita Chong, who's also... She's also the editor of my novel that's coming out next year, January. It's called The Boat People. This year's anthology, I was reading it, and it's just full of exceptional, phenomenal stories by new authors. And I really don't envy the job that Kevin and Grace and Eilert, I think I'm saying that wrong, had to do. But I'm so grateful to them for including me in this amazing company. I had 2 stories in the collection, and both of them suffered a lot of rejection before they finally found homes. So thank you to Prism International and to the New Quarterly for publishing those stories and then for believing in them and putting them out for the Journey Prize. Thank you so much. No story, no book, no short story, I'm sure no poem is written in a vacuum by yourself. Thank you to Sonam Ringpa, who answered all of my many annoying questions when I was writing the story. Thank you to the members of the Port Authority, who are my wonderful writing group. And thank you to my long-suffering husband, Tom Baird. Thank you also to all of my friends and family who came out tonight. And finally, Darlene, it was such a privilege to be shortlisted with you. Thank you for your story, which I love so much because it was full of so much authenticity and honesty. Thank you.
Before we present our next prize, which is the Rogers Writers' Trust Fiction Prize, we'd like to give you an opportunity to learn a bit more about the 5 finalists. A couple of weeks ago, each writer sat down and talked to us about their nominated book. Have a look at what they said.
It is a book of short stories, so it's about a lot of things, but I would say that the unifying themes are probably bad decisions, transgressions, but also resilience. You got to be pretty resilient if you're making a lot of bad decisions. There's a lot of ends of relationships in the story. I was actually embarrassed when I went back through and read the manuscript in its entirety. Just like, wow, geez, there's a lot of relationship endings and apocalyptic relationships. So when a person is feeling emotionally disjointed or upset, something is coming to an end in their lives, they will often make a lot of bad decisions. So there's affairs and drug use, all kinds of things that I love to get into because those are really intense moments in people's lives. It's important to me to be honest, to tell my own story, even if it means that those are kind of rough stories sometimes. Bad endings. The people on the train are staring. My phone is buzzing in my front pocket, and limp balloons hang from my braids. The heat is cranked, and my feet are sweaty from 2 pairs of socks. The train pulls into Columbia, the stop closest to home. The doors open and close, but I'm still riding.
Our more recent history with Neanderthals has been that we've turned them into an other and something that was distant. But I want to bring them much closer, and I hope the reader takes that point. In 2010, the Neanderthal genome was published. And what we found out is that people of European and Asian descent have between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. So I realized, and I've since done a test to find out that I'm 2.5% Neanderthal, but a lot of modern humans have Neanderthal DNA in them. And that's because we were able to interbreed and have viable offspring. Neanderthals were much closer to us than we previously imagined. And I wanted to write a book that brought the popular story closer to the science. I was writing a modern story and a 40,000 years ago story, and I couldn't figure out how they were linked until I thought about my experience of being a mother, and specifically of giving birth. It's something that connects me quite literally to my past, so it became the through thread to connect the two stories. The last Neanderthal. If you happen on one in the woods, it would not be by accident. She would have sensed you coming long before, felt curious about another upright primate, and allowed you to approach. She would make a noise in the brush to let you know she was there. Maybe she would drop her spear to show you that she didn't mean harm. She would spread the fingers of her left hand and raise that palm to greet you.
It's a story about two black kids feeling a certain gaze upon them by society and struggling to make their way, at times, I guess, doubting the future they have for themselves in the country they were born within. I grew up, like the boys in the novel, the son of working class immigrants from the Caribbean, a black mother and a South Asian father. I have to insist that this is a work of fiction. This is not autobiography, but I think much of the novel comes from the fact that I was compelled to imagine for myself different possibilities for my life. And so writing this novel might be imagined to be a way of working through the vulnerability I felt growing up and the possibility that life would take an ugly turn. Brother. The world around us was named Scarborough. It had once been called Scarberia, a wasteland on the outskirts of a sprawling city. But now, as we were growing up in the early 80s, in the heated language of a changing nation, we heard it called other names. Scarlum, Scarbistan. We lived in Scarborough, a suburb that had mushroomed up and yellowed, browned, and blackened into life.
A lot of the work that I did as a journalist, the residual effects of that work find their way into the novel. What I was most interested in was the transition of the central character, Surratt Chestnut, how she transforms from this trusting, loving, curious 6-year-old girl over the course of her life and what the war does to her. A lot of the things that have happened in this book, I didn't make up. You know, they've happened to other people. I didn't invent waterboarding, I didn't invent drone killings. This is the reality if you live in certain parts of the world. I hope it's taken as a defense of the idea that you can understand why somebody does something, even something heinous, without taking their side, which shouldn't be a particularly controversial statement to make, except that I happen to live in a part of the world where the idea of exploring that gray space has largely been obliterated. Not only did I not predict at the time where we would be right now, had I predicted it perfectly and written a novel based on that kind of future, I don't think a single publisher would have run with it. They would have told me to tone it down. American War. War broke them the same way made them scared and angry and vengeful the same way. In times of peace and good fortune, they were nothing alike, but stripped of these things, they were kin. The universal slogan of war, she'd learned, was simple. If it had been you, you'd have done no different.
So this accident of being lost is one of the poetry pieces or song pieces in the book. And the song is about when you're faced with trauma or when you're faced with hard times, one of the things that Anishinaabe people do is turn inside, turn inward, and look to our songs and our culture and the land to hold us. I wanted to sort of take that idea and think about what it feels like to be an Anishinaabe woman in 2017. And a lot of the sort of reoccurring themes that came up in that exploration was of being lost, being sort of dispossessed from our land, being disconnected from culture and language, and from wanting to be found. This accident of being lost, Kwe takes her off the rack and onto her shoulders. She puts her in the flatbed and drives to Chemong. She pulls her out into the middle of the lake, sinks her with 7 stones, just enough to fill her with lake and suspend her in wet. Kwe sings the song and she sings back. Kwe sings the song and she sings back.
To present the 2017 Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize, please welcome Senior Vice President of Digital Content and Publishing at Rogers Media and a Director of the Writers Trust of Canada, Steve Maish.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here on behalf of Rogers Communications to present this prize this evening. As a Canadian family company with deep roots in the publishing business, Rogers is committed to celebrating Canadian voices. We are proud to have sponsored this prize since its inception 21 years ago, and we are delighted to boost our support this year to double the prize money to the winner to $50,000. I'd also like to recognize the astounding range of talent on display in the 5 finalist books and acknowledge this year's prize jurors for their diligent work in reading and deliberating on a year's worth of Canadian fiction. Thanks to Michael Christie, Christy Ann Conlon, and Tracy Lindbergh. Once again, the finalists are Carly Baker for Bad Endings, published by Anvil Press; Claire Cameron for The Last Neanderthal, published by Doubleday Canada; David Cheriandy for Brother, published by McClelland and Stewart; Omar El-Akkad for American War, published by McClelland and Stewart; and Leanne Batasimasak Simpson for This Accident of Being Lost, published by House of Anansi Press. Please join me in applauding the 2017 finalists. The winner of the 21st Annual Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize is David Cheriandy for Brother, published by McClelland and Stewart.
Oh, man. So I'm going to decipher the notes. that I made just last minute. First, I want to say I felt profoundly honored to be nominated among the writers who were nominated for this prize, and I want to say their names with great appreciation for the work they do. Carly Baker, Claire Cameron, Omar El-Ahad, and Leanne Simpson. I want to thank the team at Penguin Random House who believed in my book. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank my publisher, McClellan Stewart, and particularly Jared Bland. I truly need to thank my editor, Martha Kanya Forster, for being with me on the page and, being the dream of an editor for me as a writer. And also someone who's supported for me for so long, my agent, Jackie Kaiser. I do want to thank the Writers' Trust and for the profound work that they've done for such a long time. And in particular, I want to thank the individuals that work within the Writers' Trust. I'm not going to name the individuals, but within the important institutions that have existed for some time, creating, supporting, inspiring Canadian literature then and now. I think those individuals have acted as quiet heroes behind the work that writers are able to do. I do want to remind people that my book is set in Scarborough, part of metropolitan Toronto. I don't mention the T word, but it's, and I do want to say that I recognize that where my novel is set is upon the ancestral territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations. I also want to say that I live in Vancouver now, and right there, and that's where I live and work is upon the unceded ancestral territories of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam First Nations. Yeah. So I do have to thank my family, my parents, Rollins and Claudette, who never had the chance to enter the world of literature, but believed in the world of literature and believed in a son's crazy hope to one day enter that world. I want to also acknowledge my brother Mark, who's inspired me in many ways, and my kids, Maya and Sky. My youngest, Sky, who's 10, reminds me that I've been working on this book for as long as he's been alive. And if you're watching live stream, eat your dinner, Maya and Sky. Above all, truly, I want to thank my partner, Sophie McCall. It's a special thing to live with a writer. Sometimes I feel I'm like 98% Neanderthal. And I just want to thank you for the love and support and belief over the years. When I had no faith and belief, you were there, and I wouldn't have finished this book without you. Finally, my book is dedicated to my mentor, Austin Clark, who died last year and who won the inaugural Writers' Trust exactly 20 years ago. And in accepting this award, I would like to acknowledge with profound gratitude and respect the work and struggles of our elders. Thank you.
I'll give you this. I definitely don't.
The final prize of the evening is the Hilary Weston Writers' Trust Prize for Nonfiction. Before we present it, we'd like to give you an opportunity to learn more about the finalists by hearing from the three writers who selected them. So let's have a look now at what the prize jury had to say.
Every writer, I would say, on the short list has their own unique, idiosyncratic way of telling a story that really succeeded in grabbing me.
You're holding a soul in your hands, and you're holding years of work, and all of the hard work that went into crafting these sentences and paragraphs and chapters is totally invisible.
I was looking for a book that would keep me turning those pages, because all really powerful stories make you want to find out, well, what happens next?
It has to be powerful and evocative and really sort of draw the reader in and seduce the reader.
So each of them, sentence for sentence, is phenomenally strong. But each of them also, you come away from it, and the entirety of this book is enormous.
They didn't remain stories just about themselves, but they were actually exploring larger questions and larger issues and things that the rest of us could connect to in a really seamless way.
Tomboy's Survival Guide by Ivan Coyote is a very tender and funny and witty memoir about a coming of age.
I see it as both a love letter to and a manual for being transgender in the world today.
One can just imagine finding this book and reading it and being able to say, okay, I'm not alone. I didn't not want to be a girl because I had been told that they were weaker or somehow lesser than boys. It was never that simple.
I didn't even really actively not want to be like the other girls. I just knew. I just always knew that I wasn't. I couldn't. I would never be.
I was impressed at Ivan Coyote's ability to maintain a tone of playfulness for a subject matter that clearly must be quite painful for them to write about.
It has a light touch on some very dark, hurtful moments.
It's rendered in an elevating and exultant and transcendent way, and it's very life-affirming in the end.
Birds Art Life by Keo McClear really is about birds, art, and life. It is a gem of a book.
McClear attaches herself to a birder as a mentor in trying to get herself out of a creative rut.
Every sentence of this book is a finely crafted gem.
I could just imagine her sitting there writing and then rewriting and then rewriting and taking out all the things that weren't needed in there in order to produce these wonderful, polished sentences.
This book really is an antidote and a bit of a solve, and it provides solace. It's comforting in a way, although it's not always easy.
You can open this book to any page, read any paragraph, and there's a really strong chance that that paragraph will captivate you and will have some statement about life on Earth that makes you go, huh.
One winter, not so long ago, I met a musician who loved birds. This musician,
who was then in his mid-30s, had found he could not always cope with the pressures and disappointments of being an artist in a big city. He liked banging away on his piano like Fats Waller, but performing and promoting himself made him feel anxious and depressed. Very occasionally, his depression served him well and allowed him to write lonesome songs of love. But most of the time, it just aided him. When he fell in love with birds and began to photograph them, his anxieties dissipated. The sound of birdsong reminded him to look outwards at the world.
Life on the Ground Floor by James Miscallick is his memoir of life as an emergency medicine physician.
It thrusts us vividly and relentlessly into what it is like to be the person who saves lives.
And he moves back and forth effortlessly as he weaves the story together.
Sliding between northern Alberta and Toronto and Ethiopia, at times you don't know where you are, which I think is the point. You know, it's this leveling. We're all the same. We're all in this together. We all come to the same end.
As a narrator, he just has this incredible voice, and the style of the writing is perfectly matched to the pace of being in an emergency room where seconds matter.
From the moment we are pushed into the light, take a wet lungful of air and scream out,
"How cold!" This body is ours alone. Its beautiful eyes and grasping hands. And it is connected to the future by the airway.
I found myself just incredibly moved.
It is about those important questions that we all have about living and about dying. How do we do them well? And how do we interact with people who are going through the extremes of both?
All We Leave Behind by Carol Off is the story of a journalist who gets caught up in the life of one of the people she covers.
Off is obviously a formidable journalist, and she turns her tenacious and dogged reportorial approach on the task of getting an Afghan refugee, Assad, to Canada.
She reaches an understanding. As a reporter, you can't just walk in and out of people's lives without leaving footprints.
Through the story of this one man and his family, we suddenly, I think, feel the story of Afghanistan in a way that we wouldn't if it was just this big picture, 1,000-foot view of the story.
She's got such a clear-eyed way of writing. You can see in the way she puts words and phrases together that she's almost hearing them aloud.
She has such a lucid, spare, fluent voice. She makes it look really easy.
I was running through the darkness
across the tarmac of Jena International Airport, weaving to avoid armed soldiers, but carrying on with single-minded purpose through the bedlam and towards the gunfire, fueled entirely by adrenaline. And at that moment I had my earliest and perhaps most important morality lesson about journalism. Be careful what you wish for.
Seven Fallen Feathers by Tanya Talaga is a story about 7 Indigenous youths who lost their lives while attending high school in Thunder Bay, far from home.
She pulls them all together into one really powerful narrative.
Talaga's reporting and research is formidable and rigorous. She presents a very powerful marshalling of the facts and a document of Indigenous suffering. And she also has a very strong and steady and stoic voice through which she tells the more personal side of the story.
It adds up to this grand, heartbreaking narrative that I think you need a book to have your heart properly broken by.
This book makes us pay attention in a way that we all need to pay attention.
It's a necessary story to read. I think every Canadian should read it. It's a hard story. It's horrific. But it's also shameful that this is part of our history. And I think it should be something that we need to confront.
Thunder Bay has always been a city of two faces. The Port Arthur side is the white face, and the Fort William side
is the red face. Port Arthur lies on the north shore. It is built up on the gentle, sloping Canadian Shield. 2-story brick houses line streets that run up and down the Shield, each with a beautiful view of Lake Superior as far as the Sibley Peninsula, where the stone-cold sleeping giant Nenebiju sleeps.
She served as the 26th Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, led Renaissance ROM, and serves on the board of the trustees of the Art Gallery of Ontario and the Aga Khan Museum. She was appointed a member of the Order of Canada in 2003 and in 2015 was invested by Her Majesty the Queen as a commander in the Royal Victorian Order. To present the final prize of the evening, please welcome the Honourable Hilary Weston.
Well, my goodness, what an inspiring and powerful evening we've had already, and now we're coming to the final moment. This evening marks the 7th time I will have the privilege of announcing the winner of the Hilary Weston's Writers' Trust Prize for Non-Fiction. This year's jurors have selected a list of books on subjects vital to our understanding of the modern world. These books that pose difficult questions and display great empathy in their quest for answers. As always, the task of the jury in selecting a winner could not have been an easy one, and I would like to recognize the prize jurors whose hard work and thoughtful attention was instrumental in awarding and celebrating this year's very best Canadian nonfiction. On behalf of the Writers' Trust of Canada and myself, thank you to Susan Harada, Arno Kopecky, and Siobhan Roberts. Once again, the finalists are Ivan Coyote for Tomboy's Survival Guide, published by Arsenal Pulp Press. Keo for Birds of Life, Keo McClear for Birds Art Life, published by Doubleday Canada. James Maskalik for Life on the Ground Floor, Letters from the Edge of Emergency Medicine, published by Doubleday Canada. Carol Off for All We Leave Behind, a reporter's journey into the lives of others, published by Random House Canada. Tanya Talaga for 7 Fallen Feathers, Racism, Death, and Hard Truths in a Northern City, published by the House of Anasi. Now, to end the suspense and the reward, I have to find the right envelope. The 2017 Hilary Weston's Writers' Trust Prize for Non-Fiction. And the winner is James Maskalik for Life on the Ground Floor, published by Doubleday Canada. And this is the other one I have to give you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's surprising. I don't know. Those of you who have read my book know that I have in it some of the best of what I know about emergency medicine. And not just the medicine part about it, but how to be a person who faces the difficult parts of the job and kind of leaves it somewhat intact. And one of the secrets that I say is that, you know, it's okay to panic, but you must do it on the inside. Because it's kind of a myth that doesn't happen. Because the truth is, you can be very nervous, but you just must not let it show. So hopefully I'm doing okay. And I want to stretch out this speech as long as I can, because as soon as I'm done, I have to text my friend Sam to let him know I'm back on trauma call. So we could be here for at least another half an hour. It'd be great for me. So the book kind of goes through three basic places. And I move through the reader through each of them to try to introduce the themes that I reflect on through the book. And that's interesting because I kind of, in the last 10 days ago, I was in Ethiopia, and I was teaching medicine there. And I was at, there's a procedure that's necessary to have a very strong wire-like object to allow you to access someone's airway. And we had a catastrophe. So I found myself in Ethiopia while I was there teaching. So I found myself in an electrician's part of the market, in an electrical shop, buying a thick piece of wire. That was 10 days ago. So I could leave it behind so they would not have to go through the same thing that they did before. 48 hours ago, I was with my brother in northern Alberta, where we were hunting moose, and we were cutting cow moose into pieces small enough to haul from the bush. And this morning I was in the trauma room, and I had the pleasure of telling a woman that her husband was going to be okay. And that's not always the way it goes. So those things packed up in the last 10 days, that's my life. And that's what I put into the book, the best of what I know. But the book isn't really just about my life, it's about your life and life in general. And I was thinking, should I write a speech for tonight? There's no way I'm going to win. So I'm not going to tempt the gods. And I thought maybe I'll just go over it in my head as I was riding here on my bicycle. And the only thing I kept on thinking was, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I realized I've been thinking about it the wrong way this whole time. That the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The beauty is the eye of the beholder. That eye is so rich with vessels and cells that are fluorescing and turning blue and green so you can get the world reflected back to you an instant after it happens, that split second after it happens, and almost perfectly reflected. And it's such a miracle that's closer to us than we even know. It is us. It's inside of us. And the two things, that's hopefully not a trauma, but it could very well be. It is. Well, I'll get back to him in a second. So the two themes that inform this book that I wanted to bring the reader through and pull them, introduce into them slowly to that miracle that is so close to them. It's intimate. They can't even see it. Because I started this journey as a scientist looking at very small details in cells, and you saw no matter how deeply you looked, the process has just disappeared and disappeared and disappeared and interconnected. And no matter how far you looked, there was another subtle layer. And then in medicine, you learn how those cells come together and how those cells form organs, and then how those organs capture energy to form life. And then you look for disease, and you look for how it comes apart, and then you intervene when you can. But my question that I can't help but reflect on is, if I am, and the trauma room is, and the hospital is in Ethiopia, as it is in Toronto, just part of that same process, that work in my body right now, keeping me well, keeping me held together, such that if someone cut themselves and the fibroblasts couldn't start tethering that skin and healing that wound, they would come to me. And I would be just a peripheralized version of that same process, and I would sew it together if the skin couldn't do it itself. And if I couldn't do it, I'd find a surgeon who could, who had an operating room full of people who could help. And if that's the case, why? Why? Why is that process at work in us that wants us so much to be well? And number two, why does it look so different in Toronto and in Ethiopia? And the answer that I come to in the book, and I think is true, is love. There's A love that I know that when I feel, if I can put myself in that place when I'm dealing with a patient in Ethiopia or in Toronto, the questions fall away about how to do the job right. It's about peace. It's about peace. This book came from a time when I was working in Sudan and a place very much at war. And I left that place, like many people do, confused and hurt and wondering how I was ever gonna put it all back together. And I got a phone call to whether I wanted to go to Ethiopia, and in my head was saying, say no, say no, say no. And I thought, well, it's close to Sudan. So that message of peace that happens when you cross the threshold of an ER, like it would at St. Mike's tonight if you came in there, and it would if you saw the people I know in Ethiopia. It wouldn't matter if you're a Muslim person or a Jewish person or a man or a woman or a young person or an old person. All that mattered is how hurt you were and how much blood you had lost and how much pain you were in. And I want to reflect on that at now and that opportunity that there is a better world, but it is in this one, closer to us than we are to ourselves. So I'm going to end with some thank yous because I'm so grateful to be here and surrounded by all these beautiful minds of careful readers, Susan, Arno, and Siobhan, who poured over these many books and tried to get the point because it's so much love and intention goes into each of those sentences. To my fellow nominees, Keo, Tanya, Ivan, Carol, I still think we should form a consortium of some kind and do much good in the world with it. To my editor, Martha Kanya Forstner, the most careful reader and important person who I think gives me that unflagging advice that is the best an editor can give. You can do better. To Bruce Westwood, my agent, to Carolyn Ford, who's been such staunch advocates, to the Writers' Trust, to Hilary Weston, for sponsoring this generous prize. Last, to my grandfather, who cannot be here, who's in northern Alberta alone. And when I explained to him what had happened, I don't think he's much more impressed that we shot a moose, I think, than this. But thank you very much, and I hope I don't see any of you tonight.
Congratulations to our winners, to our finalists. Thank you to our judges and our sponsors, and to all of you for coming and watching. It's the prerogative of the host, or the payment of the host, that I get to say that I also wrote a book of nonfiction this year. I'm obviously not going to comment on its relative merits, but I will say that I promise you this, it has more pictures in it than any of the books mentioned this evening. I have two last announcements to make, and it's very important that I do these in the correct order, as you'll understand why. I have to ask the winners to please come up to the stage for some photographs, and then I have to declare that the bar is open. Thank you, people, for coming. Thank you.